Hello, folks. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25. So then, putting away falsehood, let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another. Or more directly from the Greek, therefore, having put off falsehood, let each one speak truth with their neighbor, because we are members of one another. I know that I've spoken about speaking the truth quite recently, but this is part of the New Testament text for today, and I think there is more to say on the topic of speaking the truth. Of course, one of the things we need to do first and foremost is to speak the truth to ourselves, to put off falsehood and any attempt to pretend, and to see ourselves as we are and to know ourselves as we are. But if we had the courage to speak truth to other people, we would understand each other much better. We would get used to speaking straight and not be so hesitant to be honest. Brutal honesty shouldn't ever be necessary, because that is brutal and it is hurtful. So we have to learn to speak the truth graciously. And if we are going to speak the truth to others, then we should expect them to speak the truth to us. And that means we need to be prepared to receive some feedback that exposes our weakness or our error. And that's okay. In fact, that's very positive because it offers the opportunity for growth. We're meant to be maturing emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And it's time to give up being overly soft and overly sensitive, so that we have to treat ourselves or expect to be treated by others with kid gloves, and so that we have to treat other people with kid gloves. One has to accept who one is and who one has been. I often wonder why it was that I allowed certain people to terrify me. This is, of course, when I was much younger. And I can remember one of the teachers at primary school and one of the teachers at high school, for instance, who terrified me. And I kind of imagined that they had the power to do all sorts of terrible things to me. And then, of course, a year in the Defence Force, and there were various permanent force 1 or 2 stripe corporals at Voortrekker Hoogte who gloried in their temporary power and opportunity to use foul language. And there were other people, I guess, through the years, often people who were senior to me in age and in rank and in the church, and particularly when I was a young priest, there were a few parishioners, and there have also been clergy, not many, but there are always people who seem to enjoy being vindictive. And one of the great regrets of my life is that I was so contained and so timid. And I sometimes think if only I had my chance again. But I'm glad I don't have my chance again, because I might be too forthright. Most of the people who caused me to be terrified are dead by now, I imagine. And so we have to accept who we were, and we have to move on from that. we need to seek to be gently forthright. I've come to the point in my life, in fact, I did several years ago, come to the point in my life where I know who I am. I have confidence in my ability and in my reasonably good sense and good judgment, and I know my worth, and I'm not going to give anyone the power to terrify me. I'm not going to give anyone the pleasure of thinking that how they treat me or what they say to me is going to affect my security and my stability. There's a delicious joy in being retired, so that in a sense I'm answerable to no one. And perhaps the worst thing that could happen is that you ditch me and stop listening to these messages. And we need to realize that people do not have the power to harm us unless we give them that power, unless we allow them to have power over us. Let's get back to the text. Putting off falsehood. Let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another. It struck me that there is a lot to put off, and it's not a case of just putting off falsehood. We've got to put off the fear of what other people will think if we speak the truth. We've got to put off the false idea that we must be nice all the time. We've got to put off the anxiety related to upsetting the status quo. We've got to put off the inclination to sugarcoat what we are about to say to make it more palatable. We've got to put off the inclination to just walk away without speaking and without taking any action. We've got to put off the voice that speaks inside of us tremblingly, saying, "Who am I to point out this error, this false truth, this distorted view?" Of course, we always need to check out our motives. Why would I be confronting this person? Is it just to defend my reputation, or is there something bigger at stake? Will it ultimately be beneficial to that person if I point out to them some felt error in what they have said or done? And would it benefit the community in the long run if I address something which really should not be tolerated? The community that we are talking about here might be as small as one's immediate family. It might be the neighborhood community. It might be the Ratepayers Association. It might be the church to which we belong, or a school committee. The point is that we are in relationship. We are members of one another. And that means there is a degree of loyalty and commitment and also responsibility for one another. And we're also responsible for the welfare of the group itself. Honesty and transparency are in vogue today. People are encouraged to speak out about bullying, about sexual abuse, about gender prejudice, about corruption and fraud and theft and money laundering and bribery and nepotism. This is such a good thing. Although, of course, some young people don't really feel empowered enough to speak out about the abuse of power that they're experiencing. and of course lives can be made utterly miserable. Also, of course, one fears that sometimes somebody's name might be dragged through the mud when really they are innocent, because today there is a culture of raising stuff that happened 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And of course, that is a danger. There is so much that goes on in the church that is unacceptable. And priests aren't easily challenged when people are upset by their behavior. And what people do very often is leave the church, stop going to church altogether, or they continue to nurse some sort of grievance or grudge. Priests should not be presenting the impression that they are unassailable and that they always speak the truth. It is so easy to take offense. It's much better to seek the truth and speak the truth. It's much better to challenge and to air our grievances appropriately. No one is infallible. And working through stuff is much healthier. If it ends up that ultimately we part ways with a person, then that's okay. But we need to be honest and upfront and truthful. And then, of course, we need to have the grace to forgive, and we need to be able to move on in our lives. A key issue is this worth making a fuss about? Because, of course, some things are trivial and our reactions and our responses are subjective and personal. But distortions of the truth need to be exposed. Hurtful things need to be challenged. People who say things flippantly need to be held accountable. Earlier on this week in one of the readings, Psalm 4, I read this verse: "When you are disturbed, do not sin. Ponder it on your beds and be silent." And I think there is some merit in some of that verse, not in everything, because I don't think it is wise, if you're disturbed, to ponder it on your bed, because it will make getting to sleep really difficult. But certainly when you are disturbed, ponder it and be silent. That's a good thing to do, because then we can in due course formulate a proper constructive response to whatever it is that's disturbing us. The danger is that if we are angry and we explode, we will say things that are not kind of tempered and measured, and we will say things that we regret because we might be rash. Ephesians 4, verse 26, that just follows the verse which I gave you initially in this message. Ephesians 4, verse 26 cautions, "Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger." And that's wonderful, because it is saying up front, be angry. It's okay to be angry. But there's a kind of reminder that we should deal with it constructively, so we don't allow whatever it is to brood and to disturb our peace, and to try to deal with things as they happen, and then to clear the air and to move on. It's not ideal to react. It's much better to pause, to be silent, to process, and then to respond. Sometimes we will realize that it's just our ego that is bruised, and it's sometimes okay to take a little knock to our egos, and it's not worth getting excited about those things. But sometimes there's an important principle at stake. If we keep silent, then we are really reinforcing the other person's attitude or irresponsibility. And if we take action, appropriate action, but it doesn't seem to accomplish anything, then that's okay too. At least we've had the courage to speak or to act. And we know that we will not allow anybody the complete freedom to say or do what they like without being challenged. It's much better to speak the truth to someone than to speak what one perceives to be the truth about someone. Finally, just an encouragement to all of us to be gracious, to seek to be gracious in the way that we speak to other people. Excuse me. Hopefully we'll be encouraged to be more bold and more honest and more truthful, but we will also seek to be gracious, seek to be gentle. We need to speak wisely, carefully, with consideration. We have to be careful of storing up ammunition. And we know that it is very unhealthy to use the phrase "you always" or "you never." It's not a good practice to kind of store up ammunition, to have a whole history that we remember, that we hold on to, so that when things reach a kind of crunch point, a crisis, we then bring out all the stuff that has bothered us through the years. Sometimes behind our accusation that somebody has said something or done something that is not acceptable, there is a whole history with that person. And we will remember all sorts of stuff that they have said or done that will kind of add fuel to the fire. And so, along with cultivating the art of truthful speech, we need to forgive easily and move on. And certainly, we'd be encouraged to leave things in the past behind us. And of course, to realize that there are certain things that we will never change, certain things that it is too late to change, certain things that have happened in the past that have troubled us or hurt or offended us, and we can't really change things now. And of course, the truth is that we have said and done things that have hurt other people. And we have to live with the pain of knowing that we can't make everything right. And that's okay. And so I pray that we'll all be encouraged to put off falsehood, to put off fear, to put off the tendency to make light of some things that are really important and should be addressed. That we'll all take courage to take action rather than sweep things under the carpet. That we will all realize how important it is for some things to be faced squarely, some people to be challenged openly. We're all responsible for how the other person turns out. We're all responsible for each other's encouragement and growth, and we are part of different communities, and we can make a positive contribution to how someone else turns out simply by the way we handle disagreements or issues that crop up. I think it's a very healthy thing to do, to challenge, and I think certainly Jesus was ready to confront. We see that in his relationship with the Pharisees. He was completely honest and upfront, and he didn't mince his words, and he didn't think that it was necessary to sugarcoat some of the stuff. He always wanted what was best in other people, and sometimes he had to expose the hypocrisy and the error in the hope that perhaps they would come to a realization of the way that they were behaving, and that it might produce positive change. I pray that we would have courage to speak truthfully, and to encourage our children, our grandchildren, to be respectful but honest and truthful, and to stand up for what is right, and not to allow stuff to be swept under the carpet. And children at school, whilst they need to respect their teachers, and whilst students need to respect their lecturers, we ought to be challenging and exposing and holding people accountable. And in the end, once again, remembering all the time the importance of speaking truth to ourselves, and holding ourselves accountable, and knowing when we've slipped. And of course, along with granting forgiveness, we need to seek forgiveness, to ask forgiveness when we realize we have been off target, we have said something that's rash. So I pray that we'll all be guided by the Spirit of God in us to be grown up in the way that we handle our emotions and the issues that we encounter in our lives, so that we are helped on our way to maturity. Amen. God bless.